In this video, I will show you all 5 players that you need to succeed for the Sunday Night Football single game slate on FanDuel in under 5 minutes. My name's Quick Pick Nick, and having simulated a few dozen thousand different roster builds, here are your locks and lotteries for tonight, December 28th, 2020. If you like this kind of fast-paced, calculated content, subscribe and stay tuned for more lineups throughout the season, including a Thursday Night Football DraftKings lineup coming soon. To start off this lineup with our first lock, my model recommends taking Josh Allen at MVP. There shouldn't be any surprise here, so I'll make it quick, but Allen is obviously the best choice in this slate. Averaging above 25 fantasy points per game, Allen's points per game alone is over 8 greater than that of the next best option of Cam Newton, and once you start looking at the matchup specifics, Allen clearly becomes the top guy tonight. The Patriots have allowed the 7th most rushing yards per game to opposing teams, as well as the 15th most rushing touchdowns allowed per game. And for Josh Allen, one of the most mobile quarterbacks in the league, who's currently averaging above half a rushing touchdown per game and ranks 9th in rushing yards per game among quarterbacks, Allen should be able to add on to his already spectacular pass game with his usual scrambling capabilities and potentially a rushing touchdown on top of his average of 2 passing touchdowns per game. For the second lock, the remainder of the picks become much less clear-cut since there aren't really any players who stick out as necessary additions, so we'll be taking somewhat of a value player in order to have freedom with the rest of our budget, as my model selected Jacoby Myers. At $11,000 on FanDuel, Myers falls to 8th on the price list, which seems particularly low for one of the best players on New England. And while being the captain of a JV team might be meaningless, Myers has managed some pretty impressive games throughout the season, including 4 games above 10 fantasy points, one of which coming last week against Miami, as Myers earned nearly 13 fantasy points with 111 receiving yards. Another one of those 10-point games came back in the beginning of November against Buffalo themselves, as Myers scored about 11 fantasy points with 10 targets on the day. As the definitive top option on the Patriots, it's hard to ignore almost guaranteed volume. And given his cost ranking below both running backs on Buffalo, Myers is a solid pick who should be able to find double digits tonight. For the third pick, I'll be going with a conditional lock, meaning you should keep up to date with the injury report leading into tonight's game. In this case, if Damian Harris ends up ruled out, then you should go ahead and lock in James White as your third player. White acts as the Patriots receiving back, and last year he had quite a season, averaging above 13 fantasy points per game, but White has fallen off somewhat without Brady in town, as he's dropped to half of that at around 6.5 points per game. Without Harris, White will certainly be employed in the backfield as a short-range dump option for Newton, and even with Harris, White will still fill that role, just maybe less often. For just $8,500 on FanDuel, it's worth taking a player who could put a few points on the board with just those receptions, as over the past 3 weeks, White has managed almost 3 receptions per game, and if Harris doesn't manage to suit up, White becomes even more valuable. However, if you disagree and think White has fallen off from his former glory days in 2019, some of my simulated lineups included Nick Folk instead, or whoever the Patriots kicker will be if Folk is inactive. As for 500 less, Folk should be able to find a few solid points himself, but White just has the better overall upside, which is why he's featured in this lineup. For the last 2 lotteries, there are a couple of combinations I wanted to show in case you have a different opinion on how the game will play out. The first combination leans towards the Patriots being able to hold their own tonight, and the idea that the former MVP of Cam Newton will be able to put 2 and 2 together, as my model picked Cam Newton and Tyler Bass. Newton is the scariest pick of any player in this slate, as we've seen him bench multiple times this season simply because he was unable to complete passes to his own team. However, even though Newton's accuracy might not be the same as at his peak, Newton can still run the ball and earn some good points that way, as Newton actually ranks above Josh Allen in rush yards and touchdowns per game, averaging nearly 40 rushing yards per game and 0.85 rushing touchdowns per game. Newton did well against Buffalo the last time these 2 teams met, as Newton managed about 18.5 fantasy points, and as long as he is able to stay on the field for the entirety of the game, we should be able to expect some more good rushing numbers, especially against Buffalo's 19th ranked defense in rushing yards allowed per game and 25th defense in rushing touchdowns allowed per game. The kicker Bass should have a good night too, since whenever the Bills score, Bass scores, and the Bills will probably have a high-scoring night for a game with playoff implications. If you want a player with a higher ceiling though, you could switch out Bass for Gabriel Davis, the Bills' new 3rd wide receiver with John Brown on IR, who's been targeted at least 4 times over the past 4 weeks, which leads us into our second possible combination, as that extra $500 allows us to upgrade Newton to Stefon Diggs, who has managed at least 10 receptions over the past 3 weeks and has shown no signs of slowing down anytime soon. So if you think the Patriots will continue to play like they have recently, you should go with this lineup that is clearly favoring the Bills. But if you think New England won't go down without a fight, you should think about taking the former option. That's what my model was able to come up with for the Monday Night Football single game slate on FanDuel this December 28th, 2020. This has been Quick Pick Nick, the intersection for sports, data analysis, and speed. Thanks for watching.